If it's Wednesday, President Trump holds his first cabinet meeting, warning his team to follow his orders without exception, while vowing to forge ahead with mass layoffs as part of his and Elon Musk's sweeping overhaul of the federal government. Plus, President Trump says Ukrainian President Zelensky is coming to the U.S. this Friday to sign a deal giving the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals, adding that the agreement will not come with security guarantees for Kyiv. And a big win for the White House as House Republicans and Speaker Mike Johnson narrowly adopt a sweeping budget resolution in a critical test of GOP loyalty. But the next steps for the president's agenda will likely be even more difficult. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where President Trump held the very first cabinet meeting of his second administration, using the moment to reassert his push for total authority over the federal government, while reminding his team that he calls the shots.
Is it your view of your authority that you have the power to call up any one of or all of the people seated at this table and issue orders that they're bound to follow?
Oh, yeah, they'll follow the orders, yes, they will.
No exceptions?
No exception. Well, let's see, let me think. Oh, yeah. She'll have an exception. Of course, no exceptions. You know that.
The president also made clear that the sweeping cuts to the government will continue and that Elon Musk, who was front and center in today's cabinet meeting, will continue to run point.
If you had heard anything about members of the cabinet who weren't happy with the way things were going, and if so, what are you doing to address those any dissatisfaction?
Elon, let the cabinet speak just for a second. Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw him out of here. Is anybody unhappy?
Now, Musk, who Mr. Trump asked to speak before any of his cabinet officials, said he's just following the president's orders, while also seeking to clarify the intent behind a government-wide email telling employees to justify what they did last week or face the threat of termination.
I guess it was like last week, the president encouraged me via Truth Social and also via phone call to be more aggressive. And I was like, okay, yes, sir, Mr. President, we will indeed do that. The president is the commander-in-chief. I do what the president asks. Our goal is not to be capricious or unfair. We want to give people every opportunity to send an email. And the email could simply be, what I'm working on is too sensitive or classified to describe. Like, literally, that would be sufficient. I think this is just common sense.
And today's cabinet meeting came as the White House, in a new memo, directed federal agencies to prepare for mass layoffs, citing President Trump's election victory as a justification. Mr. Trump answered numerous other questions from reporters for more than an hour as his cabinet sat largely silent, with the president addressing everything from the war in Ukraine to looming tariffs to his continued insistence that Canada should become a U.S. state. We'll touch on all of that throughout this hour. I am joined now by NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Also with me is Bobby Allen, technology reporter for NPR, who has covered Elon Musk extensively. Thanks to both of you for being here. Gabe, let me start with you. Look, we knew that Elon Musk was going to be in the cabinet meeting, but I think that a lot of folks were surprised that he played such a prominent role. What were the key takeaways?
Hi there, Kristen. Well, certainly it was incredibly unusual, as you mentioned. This is not a cabinet member, of course, that led off this meeting and spoke for a considerable amount of time, whereas those cabinet secretaries were forced to become audience members for a large portion of this first cabinet meeting of the new Trump administration. Now, as you said, Elon Musk is defending why he is trying to slash the federal government, and he's further defended the email that he sent several days ago, saying that it was just to see if federal workers had a pulse, that it wasn't meant to be any sort of review. But President Trump today, he also went a little bit further. He's saying that it is possible that these employees, if they don't respond, could be fired, saying that they're, quote, on the bubble, Kristen.
And Gabe, I have to ask you to do a little bit of fact checking here, because the president and Musk continued to tout the savings Doge has uncovered, talked about the receipts to back up the claims. What do people need to know here?
Well, Kristen, we have been hearing from the White House, from either Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt over the last several weeks, and we just heard from President Trump today at this cabinet meeting, and from Elon Musk that Doge has cut some $65 billion so far. But a closer look at those numbers reveals, Kristen, that some of that were contracts that had either expired or were about to expire. And there were a lot of questions about how they get to that number. From our analysis of it, while the true number is very hard to tell, it does appear to be much lower than that $65 billion. Now, the New York Times also points out that several of the biggest items on the initial list that were posted on Doge's website as major cuts, they were removed from that list, 5 items, and yet the total number of the total amount that they claim to have cut still has not been lowered. So still a lot of questions, and the White House really has not provided exact specific receipts of where all those supposed cuts are coming from.
Yeah, and I know that reporters will continue to ask for those receipts. Before I turn to Bobby, I want to ask you, the White House Budget Director Russell Vought, Acting OPM Director Charles Ezell sent a memo to agencies basically telling them to prepare for large-scale layoffs. What more can you tell us about this memo, Gabe?
Well, Kristen, we have been hearing about thousands of cuts in the federal workforce over the last several weeks, and the fear of many more among many of those federal workers we've been speaking with. But yes, as you said, just now, agency heads got that email from the Office of Personnel Management telling them to prepare for a large-scale reduction in force, and that agency heads should come forward with some sort of reorganization plan by March 13th, about 2 weeks away, Kristen.
All right, Bobby, let me turn to you now. Let's talk about Elon Musk. He addressed that email that was sent to federal employees last week. And I want to play you a little bit and then get your reaction on the other side.
I think that email perhaps was misinterpreted as a performance review, but actually it was a pulse check review. Do you have a pulse? Do you have a pulse and 2 neurons? So if you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply to an email. This is, I think not a high bar, is what I'm saying. This is, anyone could accomplish this?
Bobby, people who've worked with Elon Musk before say they're actually quite familiar with getting these types of notes from him. What can you tell us about this type of strategy?
Yeah, this email was quintessential Elon Musk. It was done impulsively. It was done without telling a number of his lieutenants. It shocked more than 2 million people across the federal government. But he does it because he knows there are very few checks on his power and what he does day to day from the White House. I mean, I saw when I was covering Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter that he operated exactly this way. Employees would get messages from him at 12 at night, at 2 in the morning, on the weekends, saying one thing and then quickly followed by something that, maybe scales it back, and then followed by something that might contradict it a few days later. He is a chaos agent. He operates and thrives in mayhem. And the people really caught in the middle here are the civil servants, the more than 2 million people across the federal government. And they are obviously now, the target of Elon Musk's sledgehammer. I mean, he is staging this war against the bureaucracy, going after what he says is fraud and government largesse and abuse. But in the meantime, it's just causing so much panic and so much confusion from all of these federal workers who don't really know how to respond to these antics.
Yeah, and we've seen some of that frustration bubble up at town halls, quite frankly, all across the country. Bobby, is this basically how he runs his businesses?
It is. I mean, he doesn't like having to get anything approved by anyone. It's why if you or I try to get comments, say, from Tesla right now, if there's a big announcement, there isn't a communications shop. That's extremely unusual for a company that large, with that large of a market share. The biggest EV company in the U.S. doesn't have any communications team. It might seem like a small thing, but again, it's a window into how he operates. He likes to be, almost a little dictator of his companies, meaning that he does what he wants with very few people challenging him, without a communications person or a lawyer saying, maybe we should rephrase this, maybe we should wait, maybe we should get buy-in from other individuals. That is not the Elon Musk way, and that might work, just fine at a private company. But when you're bringing that strategy to the federal government, which has, many laws and norms and protocol, and typically moves a lot more slowly, methodically, and is a little bit more orderly than an Elon Musk company, you're going to see a bit of chaos, and that's what we're witnessing right now. Chaos that Elon Musk is himself triggering across the whole federal government.
Well, let me follow up with you, because you said that he actually thrives in this chaos. President Trump not afraid to create chaos as well. Is this a part of their underlying strategy as this shakeup gets underway?
Yeah, it's hard to have an X-ray into Elon Musk's mind to know exactly what his end goal is. But from, talking to his biographers, people close to him, people who have worked very closely with Elon, he is thinking kind of hour by hour, day by day. Sometimes he's not even sure if his opinion will, be the same today as it might be a week or a month from now. He's very much living in the moment. And yeah, there is this theory that, Musk, like Trump, they're sort of flooding the zone with so much information and so many announcements that would cause upheaval that it's just hard for everyone to keep up. It's kind of head spinning, and that confusion is kind of the point. But when it comes to Elon, again, he's just, I don't know how else to put it, he's just a really impulsive person, and he's very much driven by grievance. Just go over to his account on X and you'll see if somebody ticks him off, he will immediately attack them. And because of his power, because of his influence, because of, just how much clout he has in the White House, yes, he has some supporters, but a lot of critics right now, and he's often responding to try to quell or put down some of that criticism.
Well, it's just fascinating to get your perspective. Bobby Allen, thank you so much. Gabe Gutierrez, thank you for your reporting from the White House. As we mentioned, the president also making headlines in his cabinet meeting about the war in Ukraine, as both U.S. and Ukrainian officials say they are close to an agreement that would give the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals in exchange for some kind of economic or security assistance. Now, President Trump said President Zelensky will be coming to the White House on Friday to sign that deal, but that U.S. security guarantees are not a part of it.
I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that because it's in, we're talking about Europe as their next door neighbor. But we're going to make sure everything goes well. And as you know, we'll be really partnering with Ukraine in terms of rare earth. We very much need rare earth. They have great rare earth. We provided a great thing. I mean, we provided something very important. And we'll be working with Ukraine, and because we'll be taking that, we're going to be taking what we're entitled to take.
If the Russians get to keep the territory that they claim by force, doesn't that send a dangerous message, let's say, to China about Taiwan?
Okay. You try and take it away, right? We're gonna do the best we can. We're gonna do the best we can to make the best deal we can for both sides. But for Ukraine, we're gonna try very hard to make a good deal so that they can get as much back as possible.
Now, in his nightly address, President Zelensky said he was coming to meet President Trump for negotiations. Zelensky has long pushed for continued security guarantees from the U.S., saying today that without them, there will not be a lasting ceasefire. Meanwhile, Russia has now also proposed a potential deal to the Trump administration where the U.S. would gain some ownership of rare earth minerals in parts of Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine. That's according to two U.S. officials familiar with the matter. Joining me now is NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube, who's at the Pentagon, and also with me is Gracelin, Baskaran, director of the Critical Mineral Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much to both of you for joining me. Courtney, let me start with you. President Zelensky said again today that the deal of rare earth minerals could be part of a broader security guarantee. What is your sense of how this package is coming together?
Yeah, so it seems pretty clear that the Trump administration sees an economic deal as being the security guarantee that the U.S. is willing to offer Ukraine right now. So in other words, if the United States and Ukraine are engaged in some sort of a deal that involves extracting rare earth minerals, building infrastructure in Ukraine to try to build that enterprise, that presence alone would be the security guarantee that the United States, at this point, the Trump administration, is willing to make for Ukraine. Of course, President Zelensky, on the other hand, is looking for something a little bit more tangible in the way of military security guarantees. So some of the things he spoke about in Munich, the idea of creating basically a European army, something that would not include the United States, of course, but an army that was for the countries in Europe that would be inherent to the continent. He's also spoken about, obviously, NATO membership or some sort of a guarantee for an eventual NATO membership. That, according to what we are hearing, and frankly, what President Trump has been saying openly now, does not seem to be on the table with this deal. The deal itself actually has changed dramatically from what we first heard about 2 weeks ago when Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, went to Kyiv, met with President Zelensky, and according to officials who are familiar with the meeting, essentially handed him a deal and said, you have 1 hour to sign this, and the United States is taking over 50% of Ukraine's critical minerals. Well, of course, he did not sign that. It's not even clear that he would have the authority to do so. What we're hearing now about this deal, it seems like it's much more favorable to Ukraine. In fact, no one side would have total ownership, not the United States or Ukraine. Both sides would invest money that would then benefit Ukraine. The money would be invested into Ukraine. And very critically here, Kristen, neither the United States nor Ukraine could sell their part without the other side agreeing to whomever buys it.
Oh, that's fascinating, and there have been so many twists and turns to this, Courtney. We'll have to see how it comes together and what, if anything, happens between now and Friday when President Zelensky is supposed to be here. Let me ask you quickly, as we are reporting and as you are reporting, Russia's also proposing a potential deal over Ukraine's rare earth minerals in the territory that it illegally seized. I spoke with Ukrainian officials who were frankly outraged by that proposal. Tell me about your reporting.
Yeah, so this is something that the Russian delegation who met with U.S. officials in Riyadh last week to discuss this overall potential peace deal in Ukraine. They came to the table with a potential offer, at least elements of an offer, where the United States would have some sort of a deal that would involve them having some rights or some extraction ability for some of the critical minerals in eastern Ukraine. Specifically, they were talking about Donetsk and down by Zaporizhia, which I'm sure you will discuss further in this segment, includes some very important minerals like lithium and like graphite. Now, it's not clear at this point. It doesn't appear that there was any actual agreement that came out of this. But remember, Kristen, officials came out and were very positive about how the talks occurred. But one of the big elements that has not been discussed here is what is also in the ground in that area of the Russian-controlled area that are thousands, tens of thousands of unexploded ordnance and landmines that would have to be safely removed before many of these areas could be safely mined.
That's a really important point, Courtney, that we probably don't spend enough time focusing on. So thank you for including that. Really appreciate it. Gracelin, let me turn to you. Help us and help folks who are watching right now understand why President Trump wants access to these rare earth minerals. Specifically, what are they used for?
Rare earths are the bedrock of national security, economic competitiveness, and energy resilience. They are virtually in every defense technology, from fighter jets to ships to missiles to lasers, tanks, ICT technology. They're also in wind turbines. They are in advanced semiconductors. Rare earths are actually a group of 17 elements, and they're a bit of a misnomer because they're not actually rare. They're just difficult to extract, often found in small deposits. The reason President Trump and actually President Biden prioritized rare earths is because they were one of the first resources that China weaponized. Back in 2010, Japan and China got into a fishing trawler dispute, and China cut off rare earth exports to Japan. Now, the big problem with this is that China processes 90% of the world's rare earths. What we've seen the U.S. do over the last 5 years is they've actually invested $300 million through the Defense Production Act to build rare earth processing facilities here at home in the United States. This is a big deal because for heavy rare earths, China processes about 99.5%. However, geology is where geology is, and we actually only have about 1.5 5% of the world's rare earths here at home in the U.S. So what we've done over the last year is really start to look at strategic investments in rare earths elsewhere to bring them back home to the U.S. to process in Texas and California. So we've seen countries like Brazil, Ukraine, Greenland come into strategic focus to reduce our own vulnerability to further supply chain disruptions.
And given that Ukraine is in the middle of a war, this speaks to the point that Courtney's addressing. I mean, how challenging might it be to actually access these rare earth minerals?
There are many challenges, and ultimately, the U.S. government is not a mining company. It can create an enabling environment for the private sector to mine. Some of the clear challenges that we have, we don't even have good data on rare earths in Ukraine. The former Director General of Ukrainian Geological Survey has said there's no modern mapping of rare earths, which means that we don't have a good understanding of what is a commercially viable deposit to mine. So that's our first challenge. Second challenge is mining, exploration and mining are incredibly energy intensive. Globally, it uses about 15% of electricity consumption. A lot of that energy was wiped out during the invasion. And then three is there is an ongoing security risk. As Courtney noted, there's no security guarantee included. There is a hope that there's an implicit guarantee because of that economic cooperation. But, you know, the private sector needs more than that. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia has been simmering for 11 years, and the possibility of another potential expansion of occupied land is never beyond the realm of possibility. So given the average mine costs $500 million to $1 billion, they're not racing to make that given the risk of further land expropriation.
Well, you explained well just how complicated and complex it would be. Just very quickly, in terms of a timeline, let's say that they do sign a deal this week. How long might it take for the United States to actually be able to access these rare earth minerals?
The answer is a very long time. So on average, we got to map it first, right? Mapping takes time. Then globally, on average, from the time I identify a deposit to the time that I have a producing mine is 18 years. So really, we're looking at about 20 years in terms of the development of a new asset. President Zelensky very strategically negotiated that no current producing assets will go into this investment fund in terms of that 50% of revenue. It's only new assets in the future. So really, we're looking at a 20-year lead time here and potentially longer, depending on, you know, I mean, in the U.S., it takes much longer than 20 years. It's 29 years.
Okay. Well, you made it very clear. It would be long and complicated. Gracelin, Baskaran, thank you so much for taking us inside what this deal is really all about. Appreciate it. Courtney, Kube, great reporting as always. Coming up, inside House Speaker Mike Johnson's 11th hour push to get the first step to funding the Trump agenda across the finish line. And what happens next? Plus, Hamas is set to release the bodies of 4 more hostages as soon as this hour in return for hundreds more Palestinian prisoners. A live report from Israel is straight ahead. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. President Trump has scored an incremental but important victory on Capitol Hill after the House adopted a budget blueprint late yesterday to move his agenda forward. It was a win for both the White House and House Speaker Mike Johnson, who was able to get all but one House Republican on board with the plan. The proposal calls for $2 trillion in cuts to mandatory spending and for the House committee that oversees Medicaid to make nearly $900 billion in cuts. But President Trump insisted today that Medicaid and other entitlement programs would not be touched.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joins me now. Melanie, thanks so much for joining us. So let's talk about what happened yesterday and why this is significant for President Trump's agenda and, quite frankly, for Speaker Johnson.
Yeah, it was quite a dramatic scene that played out on the House floor yesterday. As we were heading into that vote series, it was clear that House Republican leaders did not have the votes. At one point, they even skipped the vote, moved on to the next one, and members started to go home for the evening. But behind the scenes, there was a furious whip effort underway, including the leadership team, including Speaker Mike Johnson. They were trying to twist arms. They were trying to wrangle members. They even brought them to a back room at one point, and we're told that Donald Trump himself got involved, got on the phone to work to flip at least one of the holdouts. They ended up passing this resolution with the narrowest of margins, just one Republican defection. So it was a big but messy win for Speaker Mike Johnson. But Kristen, believe it or not, that was probably the easiest part in this entire process, because what comes next is a lot harder. The Senate and the House both have to agree on the exact same budget resolution. And there are a lot of disagreements at this stage, including over how to make Donald Trump's tax cuts permanent. So once they agree on the same budget blueprint, which is just a framework, then they have to actually start writing the policy, where it could get really tricky and really complicated. So this was really just a first but necessary step to kick off this long and complicated process.
Well, case in point, Mel, the Senate passed its own budget resolution, which really only dealt with the border, whereas the House deal dealt with the border and those proposed tax cuts. How are Senate Republicans responding?
Yeah, well, first of all, some of them were surprised that the House was able to even pull it out of a hat in the first place and pull it off. I think there's a lot of skepticism that they would. I do think Republicans in the Senate are coming around to the idea that it is going to have to be one big, beautiful bill, as Donald Trump calls it. But there are still a lot of different changes that are going to be made between now and that final stage in the process. And Senate Republicans made clear that they're not just going to rubber stamp what the House passed. Take a listen.
The House plan go too far? The House plan go too far? Well, it's just a framework, but you know, it'll need to be changed.
Now we've seen what they voted on. We're going to have to come up and reconcile the reconciliation.
You couldn't accept it, the House's plan as is.
No.
Do you think that you guys should just adopt the budget resolution that's passed?
You mean verbatim?
Yeah.
Short answer is likely no. Long answer is hell no.
And as the House and Senate are trying to get on the same page, there was a big meeting at the White House involving GOP leaders, involving some of the top tax writers, and involving the Treasury Secretary. So this is going to be a huge point of contention, a huge budget battle between the two chambers as they try to pass Donald Trump's reconciliation agenda.
Mel, before I let you go, President Trump, you just heard there, was asked about entitlements. He said, you don't have to ask me anymore. I've said it before. I'm not going to touch Medicaid, Social Security, or Medicare. And yet they are trying to get these big cuts. And Republicans are saying, look, we're going to do it by rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, basically. Democrats are saying that's impossible. You're going to have to take aim at Medicaid at the very least. Talk about this debate that's playing out.
Yeah, that has been the concern among some moderate Republicans especially. So leadership had to work to convince them that they're not going to cut Medicaid benefits, that they're only going to focus on fraud and waste and abuse. But there is still some deep skepticism that they're going to be able to achieve the level of savings that they are trying to achieve without impacting critical anti-poverty programs like Medicaid, like SNAP, like food stamps. So that is something that is still up for debate. And even some of these moderate Republicans who did vote for the budget resolution in the House yesterday warned that that doesn't mean that they are guaranteed vote for the final product. And as I mentioned, they still have to actually write this bill. So still a lot of questions to come here going forward.
A lot of questions, a lot of long days ahead, Mel, for you and the Capitol Hill team. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Coming up next, the room where it happened. We'll dig deeper into what we heard and didn't hear about the administration's priorities and loyalties in today's cabinet meeting. The panel is next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. It is a very busy day in Washington, from the president's first cabinet meeting to the House adopting a budget framework and beyond. So let's get right to the panel. Joining me now on set is Daniela Diaz, congressional reporter at Notice, Ashley Etienne, former communications director for Vice President Harris, and Mike Dubke, former White House communications director in President Trump's first term. Mike, I have to start with you because you were in the first term. You remember
the
cabinet meetings in the first term. We should note that what we saw was the portion where reporters were allowed in. There's a whole separate portion where they were presumably an hour.
Exactly.
Over an hour. It was a long time. What did you make of it, and specifically the fact that Elon Musk front and center. He spoke before any cabinet secretary did.
I will say this. First of all, the fact that the press portion of this went on for an hour, generally, when you get the pool in there, it maybe lasts 5 minutes, 10 minutes, at least in our administration and in most administrations. So for the full hour, the president was basically giving a press conference.
Yeah.
What I took, though, on the Elon seating is that there were some power politics that were happening there. But I think the opposite, at least in my view, with Elon sitting behind the table. He was not at the table. Yeah. He was sitting behind. And he was asked to speak, but then when he started to speak, the president interrupted him in the clip that I saw. So there was definitely some dynamics that were happening.
There's no doubt about that. And let me play a little clip of what we heard, speaking of
because I'm ready
Elon.
to jump in.
I know you are.
This is all for you, Ashley.
Let me play a little bit. He's talking about Doge. He's talking about the receipts. Here's what he had to say.
We will make mistakes. We won't be perfect. But when we make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly. So, for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola, Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption.
Ashley, what is your take on what we saw, what we heard?
I mean, it's clear that there is no method to the madness. I mean, it's clear that there's nothing at work here but chaos. But what I really am so struck by is Trump's complete indifference to the impact of what Elon's doing on the American people, from systematically dismantling the government one agency at a time, potentially trying to fire 2 million people, but also the fact that, again, and I think this is getting lost in the media, that he accessed sensitive data at Treasury and the IRS. Where is that data? Where is it housed? Who's holding it? What is being done with it? Those are answers that the president has not answered, and he owes the American people an explanation. So for me, what this, again, continues to reinforce is that Elon Musk is in charge, and Donald Trump is beholden to Elon Musk. That is what's really going on. And he could care less about these headlines and these ruby red districts.
I think he absolutely cares about the headlines. And the headlines that he cares about is that we finally have a government, and this is in the president's view, we finally have a government that's doing things, moving forward. Speed is of the essence
here. But you know that's not what the headlines are saying. The headlines are his ruby, and those voters in ruby red. No. These are headlines, and Kristen, you've talked about this in your segments. These are headlines in ruby red states where people are concerned about the cuts to the federal government and the delivery of services for Medicare.
Just
and
really briefly on this, the one big concern, and this goes to what you're saying, Ashley, that I have, is that he's setting up his allies in Congress with no answers. And they go home to these town halls and they don't have answers.
So, Daniela, pick up on that.
That's exactly what I'm hearing from Republicans in the Senate, in the House. Majority are saying that they support what Elon's doing. They believe that federal funding should be cut, that there should be less jobs. The government should play a lesser role in Americans' lives. But they are concerned about how these cuts are going to affect them when they go back home. I mean, you know who the loudest person has been? Lisa Murkowski. She says this could affect energy projects in her state. I mean, we've been hearing from rank and file Republicans, some facing tough re-elections. Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who's up in 26, saying that while they support Elon in his efforts to cut government funding, it could really be bad for them back home.
People don't support it. If you look at the polls, a plurality say that the majority of Americans do not agree with what Elon Musk is doing, and these cuts are too drastic to their lives. So it's what the White House doing and Republicans are doing is running afoul to where
could it backfire, Mike? Could it backfire?
No, of course. And
in the midterms?
Of course it could backfire. We're moving at such a rapid pace right now, and whether you say shock and awe, flooding the zone, whatever the case may be, could it backfire? Yes. But we are that far away from the midterms that I'm not worried about it right now. But speed is of the essence here.
All right, let's pivot to what happened, the drama that unfolded on Capitol Hill overnight. The president's agenda on the line, House Speaker Mike Johnson trying to get this quote unquote big, beautiful bill passed. As the night started, there were more than one detractor, which he could only afford to lose one vote. Donald Trump helped him get it over the finish line. Talk about what you think the key takeaways are at this point.
Well, it was a shocking night because Speaker Mike Johnson sent voters home. I was there watching all the lawmakers leave the House floor and then be very confused when they were called back, Republicans and Democrats alike. And I think it was really interesting that we saw Donald Trump in the 11th hour enter and be able to help flip those last three key holdouts. The bigger picture here now being that this unlocks the actual process. We were talking behind a stage on this, that this is now the messiest fight on Capitol Hill, trying to write this bill. That's the hard part. Right. And also, Republicans are already saying we don't agree with everything in the House version of this budget resolution. We're going to make changes. And House Republicans, not liking that.
Mike, you're no stranger to this process. This is going to be a huge lift. You have the House bill, which has the border immigration piece of it, which has taxes. And then you have the Senate bill, which only deals with the border. I mean, to Daniela's point, it's very uphill to try to reconcile.
Both of the bills are uphill to reconcile. The fact that they came back yesterday, got to the next stage of this, these are all building blocks. I think everyone was surprised that they came back last night. The important thing is they've put the one block in place. They're now moving to the next one.
Morale boost.
Who knows what that's going to look like? Look, I'm an optimist, Ashley.
You're a Republican. That's hard to believe.
I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist.
I'll just say this. It's clear to me, based on that budget resolution, that the folks who voted for Donald Trump got duped. Consumer prices are going up from eggs to gasoline, and he's MIA. To make matters worse, they passed a budget resolution that would call for tax cuts on the backs of working class people. So there's one thing I will say you got to give Trump for. He's consistent. J.D. Vance said it best, that his greatest failure in his first term is that he didn't deliver on a populist agenda, and he's not doing it again. He's abandoning his voters in hardworking American.
No one got duped. This president is doing what he said he was going to do.
I don't think he said he was going to give tax cuts to the rich on the backs of poor people and working class.
That is your spin on what cutting the size and scope of government is, I guess.
Daniela, to the point of how complicated this is going to be, Democrats, and I'm going to get you guys to weigh in on this, are saying this is going to inevitably touch Medicaid. President Trump today said absolutely not. Republicans are saying absolutely not. But it seems to me this is where a big part of the fight and the messaging is going to play out.
That's part of the problem with Senate Republicans, too, because they're saying they do not want that $880 billion that's supposed to come from that Commerce Committee that has jurisdiction over Medicaid. They don't want that to touch Medicaid. But then we have Speaker Mike Johnson saying there is fraud and abuse. He's not guaranteeing there won't be cuts. And, of course, his vulnerable Republicans coming out and saying we cannot go back to our home districts. We are the ones that delivered this Republican majority, and we're not going to go back and tell our constituents that there's going to be cuts to this vital program. So a lot of debate on that.
Mike, how do you do it without touching Medicaid? I mean, you can't get the type of numbers that Speaker Johnson is aiming for. I mean, critics would say, without at least trimming something for Medicaid.
I love how Ashley is prepared for this answer. And what I'm going to throw up there is this is exactly why I'm not an elected official.
Because it's
if you ask me how am I going to spin that it's not touching Medicare, I can go there for you.
So you acknowledge it's tough.
It's tough.
Do Democrats have an opening to actually find a message? You've been very strong on the fact that Democrats have not found their message.
No, absolutely.
I don't see them doing it yet. I mean, how do you see this playing out?
No, I think that these funding fights create opportunities for Democrats. We were just talking about this backstage. To really compel and provoke votes on some of these questions about what is DOJ doing with that private data. They can compel some votes on their oversight questions and really force Republicans, those vulnerable ones, to make bad votes. They can go back to those districts and wear them out with them.
All right, you guys, great conversation.
Thank you.
Fiery conversation. Appreciate it. We will continue the conversation. There is a lot of red, guys. Looking great. Thank you for being here. Daniela, Ashley, and Michael, really appreciate it. After the break, Democrats look to chart a new path forward. I'll talk to the lawmaker hoping to lead the charge as he pushes his party to embrace a more moderate message in its pursuit of taking back power. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As Democrats debate the future of their party, a group of moderates called the New Democrat Coalition, which is the largest bloc of Democrats in the House, is out with a three-pillared vision to reach voters. Those pillars are economic growth and lowering costs, healthy and safe communities, and strong national security and defense. The group says it is launching working groups to come up with ideas to translate into policy ideas and recommendations. And joining me now to discuss this is Illinois Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider. He is the chair of the New Democratic Coalition. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it, Congressman.
Thank you.
So talk to me about this pitch. What is your vision for the path forward for the Democratic Party?
Well, the vision is doing what we did with New Dems in the last election. In fact, as the tide kind of flowed against Democrats in general, New Dems elected 25 new members in addition to protecting 85 of our 87 incumbents. So we're 110 Democrats in the Senate, very strong, who are focused on addressing the issues voters are talking to us about, the kitchen table pocketbook issues, the economy, our healthy and safe communities, and strong national security, national defense. And so we rolled out today 9 working groups dealing with everything from economic growth and lowering costs of living for Americans, addressing immigration laws and border security, working on health care, on education, working on addressing climate change and revitalizing our rural communities. These working groups will build on the strength and energy as well as the expertise and wisdom of the 110 members that make up the New Dem coalition.
Congressman, let me ask you, because you're focused on the economy, safer communities, national security. It does sound a lot like what we heard from Vice President Kamala Harris when she was running for office and from Democrats in this last election. How is what you're offering different from that?
Well, I think you'll look at it as it lays out in the working groups. When we're talking about a growing economy, it is, as Vice President Harris said in her campaign, investing in small businesses. But it's also making sure that America is leading in innovation, protecting our intellectual property, so we are inventing things here, making those things here, and shipping them around the world. It's making sure that we are building on our energy independence and moving towards a clean energy economy that protects our climate, but also grows and creates real quality, well-paying jobs. And in our neighborhoods, it's making sure that everyone can live, work, and play in communities where they feel safe, going to work, going to school, coming back home, where they can access doctors and affordable health care in the communities they live, where they have the opportunities to raise their kids, grow their families, and ultimately have a secure retirement. And then it's American leadership in the world.
You talk about the goal of regaining trust. How do you think, Congressman, Democrats lost trust?
Well, I think the most important thing we do is listen to our voters, listen to the people at home, hear what they're saying and understand what their concerns are. And they're concerned about the cost of living, but not just making ends meet. It's getting ahead and providing for themselves, but making sure our children have a better future than what our parents sacrificed to give us. And it's about making sure we hear when they're talking about immigration. Our immigration laws are broken and need fixing, but we also need to address border security and know who's coming into this country and keep out those who want to come in and do us harm. And it's making sure that our defense is ready for the challenges we face around the world, but we're addressing the needs we have here at home as well, and doing it in a smart, thoughtful way.
Congressman, you were one of the first Democrats to call for President Biden to step down in 2024. Do you think that his candidacy and the fact that Democrats didn't come out and some of them say they didn't think he was able to serve another 4 years in office, do you think that led to an erosion of trust in the Democratic Party?
Well, I think what we have to do is build trust back going forward and making sure that voters understand that Democrats are the party of bold ideas, that we're the ones trying to come up with solutions that can be implemented and will have an impact today and be successful going into the future as well. That we're addressing the things that they care most about, lowering costs for living, but also educating our kids for the future, making sure that American companies are at the cutting edge of innovation and productivity. So we're creating wealth for all Americans, and we're doing it in a way that makes sure that all Americans have a chance to have the American dream, not just the fortunate few.
I want to get your reaction to something that Democratic strategist James Carville wrote in an op-ed. He said, quote, "It's time for Democrats to embark on the most daring political maneuver in the history of our party. Roll over and play dead. Allow the Republicans to crumble beneath their own weight and make the American people miss us. Only until the Trump administration has spiraled into the low 40s or high 30s in public approval polling percentages should we make like a pack of hyenas and go for the jugular. Until then, I'm calling for a strategic political retreat." Very powerful words there, Congressman. Is he right?
I think he's half right. First of all, I don't want the Democrats to play possum. I don't want them to be hyenas. We should be lions. We should be people leading the pack. But he's right to let the Republicans basically implode. Last night, you had 217 Republicans vote for a budget bill that's going to take $800 billion out of Medicaid. It's going to cut the SNAP benefits. People who are struggling with food insecurity are hungry, not being able to put food on their table. It's going to take $200 million out of there. We already have a $1.7 trillion deficit. We should be working on fixing that. Their budget last night will add $300 trillion to the debt, which means that if we don't do something, if the Republicans have their way, we'll add $20 trillion to the debt in over 10 years. That's not responsible governance. That's not tackling our problems. Democrats, what the New Dems are doing is offering a clear alternative and a path forward.
Speaking of a path forward, I want to play you a little bit of what President Biden said about the path forward in his farewell address last month. Take a look.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead.
Do you think Democrats should be focused on that type of messaging, focused on the threat of what President Biden called an oligarchy taking shape in the United States, or should Democrats stay focused on grocery prices?
I think there's two pieces to it. I think Democrats should focus on what President Biden said is a fair shot to get ahead. Every American wants to have that piece of the American dream where they can pursue their aspirations and give their kids a chance to reach their highest potential. And what we're seeing with Elon Musk and his Doge brothers ripping apart our government, cutting benefits to seniors, to veterans, eliminating preschool for children, making it harder for them to succeed in the future, that's what the president was warning about in oligarchy. What Elon Musk is doing is trying to line his own pockets and the pockets of his cronies. What the Democrats are doing is trying to give Americans a chance to get ahead.
Very quickly, the government shuts down in just a few weeks. Some of your Democratic colleagues say they want to block any proposal by Republicans to keep it open, to really push back against what we're seeing from Elon Musk. Would you support that effort, trying to shut down the government?
Well, what I wish we were doing, we had an agreement almost 2 years ago now, June of 2023, where then Speaker Kevin McCarthy and President Biden laid out the numbers to fund our government for fiscal years 24 and 25. We had that agreement. If the Republicans would honor that agreement, we could have finished this whole thing months ago. But before I'm going to agree to anything else, I want to know, one, that what Congress does, Congress, who has the power of the purse, the president is going to implement the will of the Congress, and that what we're going to do is not Democrats negotiating against themselves, but it's going to be a conversation with Republicans how best to move the country forward.
All right, Congressman Schneider, thank you so much. Great to have you. Appreciate it. Coming up next.
Thank you.
Thanks. We are expecting the final handover of phase 1 of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal to happen any minute now. We are live in the region next. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Any minute now, we are expecting Hamas to release the bodies of 4 more hostages killed in Gaza. The 4 hostages are expected to be the final Israeli hostages released as part of phase 1 of the ceasefire deal. In exchange, Hamas says Israel will release almost 600 Palestinian prisoners, though the Israeli government has yet to confirm that number. Joining me now is NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley, who is live in Israel. Matt, what do you know about these 4 hostages whose bodies we are expecting to be returned?
Well, we know that their names are Itzhak El-Garad. I can read them out for you. Sachi Edan, Ohad Yahalomi, and Shlomo Mansour. All 4 of them were actually captured alive on October 7th and died during their captivity over the last 16 months. So we know from several sources that they were people who essentially were living, most of them, in kibbutzim, some of these sort of encampments, agricultural areas around the Gaza Strip, what they would call here the Gaza envelope. And they were captured on October 7th by Hamas and their allies, mostly by Hamas fighters. And again, they either died of their injuries on October 7th itself or were killed later on. Hamas has said that several of them were killed in Israeli bombardments, but the Israelis have neither confirmed nor denied whether or not that happened.
And Matt, today, Israelis held a funeral for the Bibas family, Shira and her 2 beautiful children whose bodies were returned last week. Talk a little bit about that and the devastation that you're witnessing.
Yeah, truly a wrenching moment, and not just for the family, but for the entire country. What we saw was a funeral cortege that started here in sort of central Israel and really lasted for almost half the length of the country. The Israeli media reported that more than 10,000 people came out to witness this cortege before the burial, again, near the Gaza Strip, near where the family had been abducted on October 7th. They were one of the more high-profile hostages because of the youth of the two children and because there was a video taken of the children, of the mother, as you mentioned, Shira, holding them as they were being captured. So this is why that took on such an outsized importance compared even to the other hostages who had been taken. And because of what happened in just the last week, the body of Shira Bibas was supposed to have been handed over by Hamas to Israel, and instead that was mistaken. Hamas corrected that with another body, but it caused a major problem for the peace treaty.
Just devastating. Matt Bradley, thank you so much for your reporting. And thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.